Hello and welcome to a new tutorial series that I'm going to do. So this is a tutorial in C Sharp, one of the most commonly used languages in software development. And we will start this probably in this video, or we might leave it until the next one. We'll also then talk about the history of the .NET framework and what we've had, what has been added over the years, because it is quite a extensive history lesson there with both the language and the framework. Then we'll be talking about what is the future release cycle of the .NET framework. Well, it'll be changing from .NET framework to .NET and then a version number. Okay, and I'll talk about the release cycle on that one. It's quite an interesting pattern of that they've decided on. Okay, then we will have our first application, our first project. Using the console, okay, the console application. We'll do it within Visual Studio, and we'll also do it within the command line as well. Okay, so you can be able to build both in different types, in different ways. Okay, especially with the console. Then once you're happy with that, and once we're happy with that, we will create our first graphical user interface using .NET Framework 4.6, which is the last of the .NET frameworks as in the old style. Okay. Within that, we will be creating variables. I'll give it a bit of a brief but most important lesson in object-oriented programming, in which we'll create classes, objects. We'll then extend our user-defined classes that we create our own. Okay, we'll build our own data types. Okay, which what we can do is we can actually change certain things within a data type and how it's displayed and what it does. And we can use our own name conventions. We'll build complex return types. Okay. With this, we can actually, instead of only being able to return one type of data, we can return multiple types of data. We'll do with that. Then we'll move on to working with files. Okay, so that's the files on the hard drive. Okay, or the drive location within the application. And then we'll kind of towards finish off this first half of the tutorials with working with databases. Okay, so the commands, the keywords that you need within Visual Studio itself. And then obviously we'll be looking at going to our external application. As the keyword there is SQL, the server version of a database. It's not Microsoft Access. Access is a single user database, not a multi-user database system. It cannot handle it. Sorry for that. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a little chat now, because obviously this is we're going to give it a bit of time, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the language itself. Okay, so Visual C Sharp, okay, is a mixture, a culmination of two languages. Okay, it is the graphical designer of Visual Basic, okay, which has been around for some near enough 30 years. Okay, and the structure and the command structure, the language structure of C. Okay, so the way we write things is in the C way, but the way we design things is in the Visual Basic way. Okay, which we use the IDE, the designer, and you'll see that later. So version 1 of this language was released to the wild in 2002. Okay, with version 1. Okay, just 1 second. Now that was the very first version of Visual Studio as a extension to the older C++ designer and development studio. Okay, so let me just grab my information. Okay, so obviously, here we go. So and it was just it's more static. It was a very early version. Okay, but we're now actually on version 10, and that's took 20 years to do, or 19 years. Okay, so between version 1 and version 2 of this language, it's about 3 years. Okay, so we then moved on to nullable types, genetics, and embedding or enabling strong data typing. Okay, to improve the code performance. So it was always an improvement. It's always an improvement. And it wasn't until around about 2007, okay, that we had language integrated queries, or LINQ. Okay, so that we can use our queries to our databases, and also using Lambda functions and expressions. Okay, so we will cover some of those as well. 3 years pass again to version 4, okay, which was then in 2010. Okay, and it had, each time Microsoft was released a version of Visual Studio, they released a newer version of the C# language. Okay, once you obviously went up in your project versions or your Visual Studio versions, you couldn't really tend to go back, because it would actually not work, because the additional functionality that was added to the language in the newer versions of Visual Studio made it incompatible. Okay, and then obviously we were at version 4. That gave us also version 4 of the .NET framework, which I'll explain in a little bit. So the .NET framework was way back then in 2010. Okay, and they've slowly developed that one over the years. Okay, so obviously 2 years went past, so they kind of reduced for virtual files, which allowed simplified asynchronous tasks to be completed. We could go over that. Now, we kind of had a shift in version 6, okay, which was about 3 years later. 3 years later, in 2015. Okay, so 2013 version of Visual Studio had version 5 as well as 2012. Okay, so obviously version 6, 2015. And this is where it kind of changed. Okay, that we would it's not so much change, but the language, as I said, previous versions wouldn't work, but they kind of changed that with this version. Then we have to wait 2 years later for 2017, and that gives us version 7, which allowed us to do literals, digits, separators, pattern matching, out variables, tuples, which we will go through, and then then we had about three additional versions to version 7, so revisions. Okay, so August 2017, 7.1, which included default liberal expressions, tuple element names, and as asynchronous main. Okay, 7.2, a few months later, private protected access. Okay, 7.3 was released, which was only a performance update. Okay, May 2018. Version 8 then got released in 2019, and that gave us the nullable and the switch expressions within our language. Obviously, November 2020 gave us version 9. Okay, and then obviously November 2021 gave us everything that we've got today. And I will be using the newer version. So this is version 10 that we will be doing all these these projects and our code base. Okay, so we do have standards. Okay, so 1, 2, and 3. Not 1, 2, 3. It's 1, 2, and 5, but there's 3. We are still working, or they're still working on version 6 and version 7. Okay, C# is open source. Okay. Now, we have just one thing. I just want to say. Okay, so I've given you the history of the language, the framework. We will do that shortly. We'll do that in another video in the future. But what I'm going to talk about now is understanding the grammar that we're going to be using. Okay, and in C#. Okay, so it includes statements and blocks. We document our code using comments. Okay, so like in English, anybody who wants to program in C# has to learn English. Okay, because it is those are the key words. Okay, they're all in English. They're not in any other language, I'm afraid. Okay, so obviously you will see similarities between the English language and C#. Okay, so in English we end our sentences with a full stop. Okay, within C# we have to end our sentences with a semicolon. Okay, it's composed of multiple words and phrases, with the order of the words being part of the grammar. Okay, so and that's true for C#. The order we put our various things, our commands, our variables, our data types, there is a specific way that we have to do it. Okay, we'll show you this. So adjectives comes before the noun. So data types become before variables, okay, when we are creating them. Okay, so we end the statement with a semicolon, which we've said. Okay, if we have to do any mathematical equations, we put the total first, equals, and then the mathematical equation. Okay, and I'll show you how to do that. So the order of the operands, which is your plus, your minus, your division, your subtraction, your multiplication, your equals, all have to be in a specific order. Okay, so when we want to put comments in, we use some slashes, okay, that go from right to left, okay, in a downward angle, okay. But if we wanted to put a few lines of comments in, I'll show you this as well. We put a slash and a asterisk, okay, or also known on the computer keyboard the multiplication sign. And then we put our comments in, and then we end with the asterisk and then the slash. Okay. Now, believe it or not, I'm going to compare. So, in a minute, I'm going to compare. So, our paragraphs, okay, within programming, within C#, we use what we call braces, okay, curly brackets, whichever one you want to call them. But I will always say braces. It's the same thing. So please don't say, oh, they're curly brackets. I am saying the way I say them is my way. Okay, everybody has their own. Okay, so we put them, our sentences, our paragraphs in these brackets or these braces. Okay, and it indicates a block of code, okay, within a function. Okay, we also use them for defining our classes, our namespaces, our functions, our methods or methods. Okay, and we must always close the block off with the closing bracket or brace. Okay, there are, I know this is a lot of information, but hey, it's okay. There are a lot of words that you cannot use for variables, and we'll go through all those when we're understanding, or when I'm going through, when we're going through creating our code. Okay, so the English language, whether it be British, American, Indian, Australian, anywhere in the world, right? There is 250,000 words. Okay, and we know every single one of them because we get taught them within our dialect. Okay, so C# has 100 words. Okay, so it has about 100 words. Okay, so people will say, well, why is it so difficult to learn when if it only has 0.0146% of the English language? Well, it's that developers need to be able to define new words, okay, with new meanings. So apart from the 100 words, we will teach you some of the hundreds of thousands of words that we can use. But you will learn how to define you need to define your own words as well. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is, this is an indicative list of what we're going to be doing, okay, on the screen. But I feel like within this video. I just want to get you to see the IDE and how it's laid out, and so I do have it loaded up behind this box, this window. Okay, it is Visual Studio 2022. Okay, it is 64-bit. Great. Yeah, it is good that it's gone 64-bit. So, hopefully you've got everything installed correctly, including GitHub Desktop, and you've signed up for that. Okay, if not, the GitHub Desktop, you need to install it. GitHub, you need to sign up for that. Use your email address, sign up for it, start creating projects. Okay, assign that email address and username to your GitHub Desktop account or application. Okay, because I will show you how to push things to repositories and pull things through GitHub Desktop and through Visual Studio. Okay, some say it's easier doing it through GitHub Desktop. Some prefer actually Git's implementation within Visual Studio. Okay, so if you've installed all that and we're on ready to go, now we can do one or two things here. Okay, we can continue with cloning a repository. We can open an already project that we have. Okay, you'll search for that. Open a folder that is for web-based projects that you can open the whole thing up in Visual Studio and it will be there. Or we can create a new project. Now, we will do quite a bit of creating new projects, but we can also continue with code without doing building any of any code, just to get the interface. So, I'm gonna just create without code. And I'm going to show you the other way to actually get it. So to get back to that box, okay, oh, you pressed the wrong button. No, not to worry. You don't have to shut the application down to get it open again. So if we go into our file, we hit start window, okay, that will bring up back that box. Or, because we're starting a new project, we can use the new command, okay. We could create a repository, we could create a project, and we could create a new file. Okay, they have different options. So, when we create it, when we click the last box on the start screen, it will bring us to this form. Okay. Now, I'm going to create. So I've got C# Windows. I'm going to change it to console. Okay, and that gives us some additional options that we want. So I'm going to use the second one. Okay, up until about a couple of days ago, there's only 3 on there. Okay, so I'm going to go with the one with .NET Framework. Okay, I'm going to click next. I'm going to give it a name, video 1. I'm going to leave it as the framework 4. But if you've installed any other frameworks, it will allow you to change. But we just want that. Okay. Click next, create, and it will create the application for you. And as you can see, our interface is changed a little bit. So we have various windows. Okay, we have on the left we have the Server Explorer, which we'll go to in another video later down the line. That's where we do our later on in the series. Okay, we have our toolbox, which we will need when we do our Windows applications. There's no tools in that toolbox for console applications. Then we have our data sources. Now that is for our database, but we don't tend to. I'm going to show you how to use Visual Studio and databases without even having to use the internal data sources tab. Okay, we have our main window, we have our output at the bottom, we have our error window, okay, which is tabbed across. So at the minute there's 3 tabs. We could have our errors, our warnings, our messages. Now obviously if there's any errors, it won't compile. Okay, so we create our logic in a human readable format, okay, and we compile it into machine logic, okay, which is ones and zeros in a specific stream. Okay, so on our right hand side we have our properties. With the application console, we don't have any properties. With in the sense of what we need properties for. Okay, so properties. So we do have a properties tab, which just gives us our general information. Okay, it's not really that much we can do with this. We could set build events. We can say what we put into our build. So I'm going to take off 6. So mine is 64-bit. I'm developing a 64-bit application. We can optimize our code. I can allow unsafe code, which I'm not going to, because we need to keep it as. So we treat warnings errors. Okay. This allows us to say that our application. So if we put it on all, it means that our application cannot compile until all errors and warnings have been cleared. Okay, so we treat the warning as errors. Okay, I'm going to leave that on because that is integral. Okay, and then we know that anything that is a warning. Okay, we'll see a lot of warnings when we do our other applications, that you'll see warnings happen. Okay, messages are just there. They just say, look, you could do this a different way, and it'll be okay. We don't have to. We don't have to action those. Okay, but warnings and errors, we have to make sure that there is none to actually build our application. So debug, so start the programming, how we start it. Any resources, we don't contain resource files, so any pictures, images, that will get created there. But we won't see that until our Windows Form application. Any services, we don't need that. Any settings, we don't need that. Reference path, no. Signing. So if we need to sign our manifest, our assemblies, this is where we would put our details. The same with security. Okay. When we publish, it allows us to set up our publication, how we version our publications. What I'm now going to do is I'm just going to save that. Okay, so now, okay, so that's our properties. So the Solution Explorer, this is where we have all our code files for our application. Okay, and we will expand on this one, and we'll add our data to our Windows application to this folder, and it'll all build up there. Okay, we can load quite a lot of projects into this this version of Visual Studio. the previous version, 2019 and before, had a memory limit. So if you had 10,000 projects in a solution and 50,000 lines of code in each, it wouldn't work. It would crash all the time because the amount of memory that Visual Studio needed wouldn't would run out. So right, so we're going to create our first statement, and you're going to see our okay. So within our middle bit, we have a namespace. Every application has a namespace. Okay, and it's usually the name of the project or the name of the solution. Okay, and project. Okay, so when we talk about the framework in our next video, I will discuss what these mean and why we have them. Okay, so we have a class, which is our program. Static void, which means it doesn't change. Our void. Okay. The main function. Every application needs a main function. We've got some arguments. Okay. Now I'm going to take out the arguments because I don't need to pass any arguments through. If my application had to pass arguments, then that's where we'll put them. So this is just going to console. So whoa, within Visual Studio 2022, it can predict what you want, what it thinks you want to write. So it is telling me that I can go tab, and it will fill it in. Okay, so I am going to press tab once, and then tab to accept. Okay, and as you can see on the bottom, we've got our errors. CS1002 means that it's waiting for a semicolon. Okay, and once I put the semicolon on there, it will. Now, because of the way the Visual Studio will execute this application, it will flash up and flash away. So I want to add a read line, a read key. Okay, and basically what that will do is it will stop it for me. Okay, so I'll press F5. F5 is to run it. Now at the minute your debug release, so it's gone into use adjustment code, so continue debugging. So it's just gone off to the other side of my screen. So as you can see, it has come up. Now if I didn't have that read line or that read key, it wouldn't it'd flash up and then flash off. So I press on the key and it's gone. Okay, so right, so we're I'm just looking at my output because sometimes it's quite interesting when it's actually outputting to. Okay, so right, just debug. Right, so it's come back up again, and I'm gonna debug properties. Let's have a look. I thought I didn't active. Set as that. I'm just trying to see where it's optimized code. So if we set it as optimized code, then it will say that it is a right. So okay. So project. Okay, so right, so that's it. That's okay. Yeah, because it's on got optimized code, it will think it's a release version of um, the actual application. Okay, so if I now start it, it's disabled it. It's brought it up there. It's actually in the debug folder, because you can see. So it'll put it in a bin folder for binaries. Okay, and the debug, and then the name of the exe file. Okay, so what I am going to do, I'll do this off screen to okay. Okay, so this is the project folder. I've made it a little bit bigger so you can see it. Okay. Right. Okay. I could do it this way. I'll just do this. Okay, so now make it smaller, but we can see it. So I'm going to type in dir. So as we can see, our project solution. Okay, so the SNL file is the solution. So if we go into our video 1 folder, and we can see that we have various files. Okay, so we have a bin file, an object file, and the properties folder. Okay, so if we go into our bin, okay, so it's not the, so we have a release. Let's see if there's nothing, so there's nothing in there. Okay, so if we go to our debug, okay, there should be some files in here. Okay, and we have 3 files. Okay, the top one, the exe file, is our application. Okay, so we have a config file as well, if we want to put any configuration files in there, and the PDB is a database file of our application. Now what I'm going to do is 1.exe.config. Let's have a look at what that looks like. Okay, so it's got off some other side of the screen. So this is it. This is the configuration file of that application. Okay, so it's a text file. So it's an XML text file configured to start. So it will push out the framework that you need, the actual version of the framework. Okay, so if your machine doesn't have that, then it will allow Windows to actually pull that framework down and install. Okay, so we have actually covered quite a lot here. Okay, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to press that on there. So I'm now going to end it here. Okay, for today, or for this session. So please like and subscribe. Okay, on the YouTube, it's engagement, good engagement. Okay, and what we'll do is I'll just bring up my, so we have done this. Okay, we've got a bit of the language. We've although it's been very basic, we've done this one, and then next time we will look at some of the others on here. Okay, so thanks for watching, and I will see you again next time.